Well, I'm going through all the gears in this gearbox and removing this rust. Most of it is cosmetic in any case, because the actual part where the tooth engages with some other gear is not rusty, although it is shiny, but it's also pitted in some places. So I'm using a combination of this big wire wheel, this tiny Dremel wire wheel, which is a bit too small, but it does the job between the teeth, and some of this Scotch-Brite. So after treatment it looks more like that. Not perfect, but it's going to have to do. Well, I've got a useful but expensive parcel from Colchester Machine Tool Solutions, containing 6 spare parts for the feed gearbox. When I took this thing apart, I discovered that this shaft was worn here and this bush was worn. So there was considerable slop, which wasn't acceptable. My first thought was, well, I can easily make this bush, and maybe I can make this on my Chinese mini lathe. And then after looking at it and finding it's got a very thin bronze sleeve fixed in there somehow, and knowing that this bush is a press fit into the gearbox wall, I decided it would be less bother and safer to buy replacements. Looking at this, I decided that I didn't like the design of it, because this piece passes through the wall of the gearbox there, so this is pressed in to the gearbox wall, and it's got a seal here which bears upon this surface of the gear, which goes on like that. And looking at it, I presumed that the purpose of this seal was to stop oil from leaking out of the gearbox, because the oil level is about there. But that's absolutely fine. But the question arises, how is this bearing to be lubricated if you've got an oil seal here which is cutting off the flow of oil? Oil can't flow down there, it can't flow down there. This is outside the gearbox, that part. It is true that there is a hole right down this thing. But that doesn't help us, because that hole is blocked up by this tight-fitting shaft, and although there are 2 transverse holes in this shaft, both of them are blocked by spiral roll pins. If they'd been slotted roll pins, you could have argued that oil could have somehow worked its way through, but they're spiral and they completely block the passage of oil. So with this in place, there's no way that oil can pass this way or that way to this bearing. So the bearing is effectively, unless it is lubricated outside by spraying oil on here, and there's nothing in the lubrication instructions to tell you to do that, this is sealed. This shaft, by the way, is blocked here. So there's no way, and also you've got the drive shaft fitting in here, but going along the bed, but so that goes straight through and is blocked by this shaft. There's no way it can pass from there to this OD. So this bearing is effectively running dry, or with whatever lubrication was put in it at the time of manufacture. And so it's not surprising that it has worn. So I was all fired up to challenge the 600 group about this. And in fact, I prepared a PDF describing the problem. But meanwhile, I ordered the replacement parts. And then the head of their spares department rang me up and said, "We've redesigned this bit, but it's still compatible with the rest of the gearbox." So I don't know, that's very interesting. So here's the replacement. What we have here is exactly the same, except it's different. They've made this shorter and made the bush bigger, and the gear is still in the same place. They've got rid of this oil seal here. So what we've got now is let's be gentle with this. We've got a shaft seal here, and we also have an oil groove on the inside of this, which is lovely. So now the seal is on the outside of the gearbox, where it should have been in the first place. And when we put this, we've got the oil groove in there, and when we put this on, I'll line up that hole exactly with the roll pin. There is a crack here of at least 1.5 millimeters, as you can see there, where the oil can pass through there along the groove and lubricate this bearing. So I don't expect to get this problem again, and I'm very pleased about that whole thing. It shows that Harrison at some stage, they said, my lathe is 1986, they said sometime after that, maybe 2005, they made this change. And it still fits on here as before. This is a torque limiting clutch which fits on the shaft we were talking about before, with ball bearings in there and so on and so forth. And there was nothing wrong with this when I disassembled it, but unfortunately I dropped it on the ground from waist height and it cracked. I don't know if you can see that, there's a crack all the way along there and all the way along the other side, and it goes right the way through. It's surprising it hasn't fallen apart. It must be cast iron. Steel I don't think would have done that. So I thought, okay, well, I've got to order, or either make or order another one of these. This is just the sleeve. The part that I ordered was just the sleeve, but what came was the whole thing, including this bit and all the bellwether washers and this inside bit. They all came together. So I got more than my money's, I got more than I was expecting on the new one, which is in a way is quite a good thing, because I don't know if you can see that was pretty rusted, pitted here, and I had wondered, shall I just skim this in the Chinese mini lathe just to make it smooth? But this one is obviously smooth. Funnily enough, it looks as if maybe this has come off some fairly new lathe, because it's obviously been used. This is where the ball bearings run round when the torque limit comes into effect. Anyway, so I got that, and then I got a replacement for this gear because it was so hideously pitted. And as a luxury, probably unnecessary, I got replacement for this gear, which was the other one that was pitted but not quite so much. And they gave me a free roll pin. Funnily enough, this roll pin is not a spiral. This is a slotted roll pin, but the one that was in there originally was a spiral one. So whether that matters, I don't know. Shouldn't think so. Well, I've repainted this gearbox, and I trust it more or less matches the colour on the original lathe, using Paragon paints. So now what we have to do is reassemble it. I'm having a bit of trouble with this top shaft. I noticed when before I took it out that it was actually quite stiff, and it's quite loose now, but if I put this roll pin in, it has the effect of moving this very slightly that way and pinching the shaft between these, or rather pinching these gears between this bush and the outside of that bush. And I'm wondering if this is because I'm putting back the old roll pin that I took out. Maybe it's very slightly bent, but I've also, just looking down this hole, it doesn't seem to be completely clear all the way. In other words, the hole that's opposite this doesn't seem to be exactly in alignment. So I thought, well, shall I just shave a bit off this bush, thereby allowing this to go wherever it wants to go, while still leaving a little bit of slop in the shaft? Or should I just try drilling this out with a 5mm drill, just to make it absolutely straight all the way through? So I've decided to do the latter, and we'll see how disastrous that is in a minute. Right, well, I drilled that out with a 5mm drill. Of course, I didn't really want a whole load of swarf in this gearbox whilst I'm reassembling it, but I've blown it out with a compressed air. So now it's completely free moving, and it has no play that way, so that I think must be good. Just a point about installing this first shaft. I've actually taken this in and out 4 times. What you need to know is that this fork and that fork have to be engaged before you put this shaft on, because you can't get them on afterwards. This one is okay. Just a note about this splined gear. You need to put it on so that this grub screw will engage in that hole. One thing I've just discovered, these 2 grub screws here, which merely kind of retain these bronze bushes, and are somewhat unnecessary in fact, because they seem to be almost pressed in there. But if you do these grub screws up tight, it binds this shaft. So binds this shaft. So be careful. Well, I've been doing this amidst the occasional torrential downpour. So water is coming into the garage, as it always does in the first few feet. And I've almost closed the door to try and reduce that. Not ideal circumstances. So I'm just going to insert this new revised bush, which I think is just a tight slip fit. Got to get this in line with that grub screw. Well, I'm just putting this shaft in. You have to get these gears in the right place. I haven't fixed this one yet, and I haven't fixed this one because I have to put this pin in which fixes this thing to this shaft. And then this gear comes back on top of that, and what's stopping this moving now? Oh, well, that would help. Oh, I see. You stupid boy, take that nail out. Oh, maybe I was just using this to... It's better. I've overdone it. But what I don't like is that this is so stiff now. I really don't like that stiffness. So this shaft is stiff. I can't have it that stiff. This is an alignment problem, I fear, with this new bush. That is horrendously stiff. Don't like it. Do not like it. Right, so nothing is engaged now. Stop. Stop it. Stop it. I fear I may have slightly bent this shaft because, don't see, well, I haven't been I wasn't hammering on this shaft, but it's this shaft is perfectly okay there. It's not engaged with anything else, but what's it engaging on now? There's nothing connecting this, so why is it? That is stiff. Until it gets right. That is really stiff. Until it gets around there. I can't have that. Well, what I've done is remove the gear so that I can test this more easily. Now, it's perfectly okay until I put this roll pin in, when it suddenly becomes stiff. Now, this roll pin is perfectly straight. I think I'm going to have to hone this bush, the idea of this bush. It's the only thing I can think of to do. After all the complaints I made about this bush not being tight enough, it's now too tight. Well, I'm just trying to test whether this shaft is bowed. So we've got it on V-blocks there. So that's on naught. Just going to hold this where the blue dot is. That's also naught. -2, -4.5, -5. So that's that one, which is so right. So it's -4 there. And we come back to there, +2, so that's 0.06 millimeters, 60 microns out of true. I'll do the same thing at the ends. I don't think it's moving much there. And at the other end, it doesn't move much. So this is a banana-shaped shaft, which is rather annoying. It's even bad here. So that's naught, -3, -6, -8, or 7. My problem is to avoid moving it this and left and right. And it's plus a half, and we take that to 180 degrees, and it's minus 6. Yeah, so 65 microns, it's out there. So it's bent along here, like that. So, not having a press, what I did was I took the high side and put it in this vise like that. Did it up tight, and then I held this on here, and I gave it 3 sharp taps like that. Well, I'm going to try one more bit of bashing. Right, well, after that bashing, let's see what we've got at the operative end. Where's my mark gone? That was the high point before. Naught, minus a half, naught. I don't see it I can expect it to be getting any better than that with just using a lump hammer. Well, I'm working on the principle that this bush costs less than half the price of this less than half the price of this thing, which fit in there. So I had a choice of taking something off here or taking off something off the inside of here. So I decided to take something off the inside of here, thereby preserving this in a pristine state. So I have kind of honed the inside of this just using red Scotch-Brite. And we'll see if that produces an acceptable result. Still slightly, very slightly stiff. I still don't like it. No, I don't like it. Doesn't like. I do not like that. Still, we have, although we've got a very slight slot there, none at all here, so I can do it a bit more, I guess. Well, in the end, I gave it a bit of a whirl with this, not having a hone that would fit inside there, and then Scotch-Brited it a bit after that. Well, I have literally spent the whole day trying to make this shaft run free, and I think I have at last got it right. And there's no slop in it, but at least it runs freely now. And thank God it's time for tea, 4:05. Well, now at last I can do what I've wanted to do from the beginning, which is just to turn this easily in either direction, which is nice.